Good evening and happy Thursday. Thank you for those who are watching at home. Thank you to all of the team effort that was put together or brought together to put this together tonight. Tonight we will be hosting our community budget meeting led by our superintendent, Dr. Omi, and Monica Lemboy, our Monica, I apologize. What is your
exact Director of Administration and Finance.
Bingo. So team, we will start by proposing or presenting a proposed budget, and we will save questions towards the end of the meeting. Thank you for joining us, and I will now turn it over to Dr. Beta.
Great. First, I want to say thank you, everyone, for being here tonight, those that are listening on Zoom and those who are listening online virtually as well. I am extremely excited to present our budget for fiscal year 2022. We have taken a lot of input from our staff and from our community, and as a result, we have come up with 3 themes for our budget. Reopen, restore, and rebuild. And that's what this budget will do as we begin to start having a conversation about reopening schools. And then we're going to restore years and years of cuts with the Student Opportunity Act that we will finally receive some. And then we're going to start to rebuild this will be year 1 of the Student Opportunity Act, but we're going to rebuild after COVID, even as a tail end, and we're gonna just restore. So our topics for tonight will be funding for public education in Massachusetts, this Chelsea Public Schools revenue and expenditure, our revenue forecast, expenditure forecast, proposed budget plan, and then our next steps. So our vision, Chelsea Public Schools is a gateway school system that welcomes and educates all students. As we think about our budget, it's important that we have a strategy first and a vision, and then we create our budget from our vision and our strategy and from what we see is important to Chelsea Public Schools and our community. And so from what we've heard from the listening conversations from Student Opportunity Act and the listening conversations those last month, we have come up with a theory of action for our strategy regarding our budget. And this is the theory of action. If we improve the quality of teaching and learning at every school, and we provide innovative and enriching programs for all, recruit, support, and retain diverse teachers and leaders, engage families as our partners in our core work, and ensure efficient and effective operational systems, then we will deliver the high quality education to all students that our Chelsea students deserve and will improve outcomes and access across the system for all students. And every student will graduate from high school on a path to college and career success. So this drives us. Last year, we created Bridge to Success 2.0, and the vision of a graduate is this is what we want every student from Chelsea Public Schools when they graduate from our schools to be digitally literate, college and career ready, and biliterate. And so at this time last year, we were excited. We had held 7 community meetings about the Student Opportunity Act, and that's where we received a lot of information for our Student Opportunity Act plan that we submitted to the Department of Education. It's a 3-year plan. We finalized goals and spending for an anticipated $11 million increase. And then our budget was drafted and ready for presentation to school committee. And again, what we heard during that time, and we continued to hear, is this buckets of, we divided it into 4 buckets: rigorous teaching and learning, expanding opportunity and access and equity, family and community engagement, and then supporting operations to support teaching and learning. But then all our hopes were dashed, were cracked, everything due to the crisis. We had to make a huge pivot and turn. We had an emergency school closure on March 13th. Our district revenues became uncertain, so then we had to propose a zero revenue budget. And then we used CARES Act SR1 funds to maintain nurses, social workers, and parent liaisons, so that way we wouldn't risk the reduction of those critical positions. And we received some additional funding in October based upon enrollment only. So we made it without any cuts, and we did have a few accomplishments despite the crisis. We ended up in the fall 2020, we added a couple of permanent positions. We added 9 teachers in a total in all of our schools except for at the Chelsea Opportunity Academy. We added 2 computer technicians to support all the digital learning happening in the city of Chelsea, and then 1 recruitment and retention specialist. And we restored special education, information technology, and buildings and grounds cuts that were made in the spring. We also had grant funds and one-time spending used to support remote learning. And what we did with this is we had limited duration of teachers and paraprofessionals. We added 3 parent liaisons, classroom monitors for our centers for remote learning. We added additional tutor hours, Chromebook and Wi-Fi hotspots for students, laptops for teachers and paraprofessionals, additional software such as Nearpod, Pear Deck, Padlet, Seesaw. We purchased connected classroom studios. We also have air purifying equipment for all classrooms and offices. And we did replacement drinking fountains with water bottle fillers. And we purchased PPE, which included some masks, face shields, sanitizer, wipes, and many other PPE materials. So this year, our budget development was, again, we took some of the best practices that we learned last year while we were doing SOA, and what we heard was that people really enjoyed the engagement and the community conversations. So we continued with those community conversations because we felt that that was important that we hear. And because of everything being virtual, we actually had more engagement in our community conversations this year. So we had 3. Our first community conversation was with the community at large. We had about 20 participants. And our second community conversation was with our K-8 educators and staff, teachers and staff. We had 75 participants. And then our third community conversation was with our educators, teachers, and staff in grades 9 through 12, and we had 53 participants. And the feedback that we received was, wow, this is so great. We really appreciate this venue. Is this something that we can hold over and do even when we're in person? It was extremely positive. So we took all of that information, including meeting with schools and departments. Each school and department presented their thoughts and ideas to us as well. And we listened to the community, listened to the departments, listened to principals, and that's how we came up with this budget. And just as an FYI, the Student Opportunity Act funding is blended into the regular Chapter 70 annual funding. So it's blended into our Chapter 70. And so I'm going to turn it over to Monica. She's going to go through all the exciting ads and the budget. So Monica, it's all yours.
Thank you, Superintendent Abeyta. I'm going to take a little bit of step back just to kind of orient everybody to how funding for public education in Massachusetts is allocated. The first thing the state does is it contemplates what does it cost to educate every child who lives in the city of Chelsea, regardless of what school they go to, whether it's Chelsea Public Schools or a charter school, a technical school, etc. The state then looks at local revenues and determines how much can the local community contribute toward the cost of education of students in general who live in Chelsea. This is a look at their property taxes and other kinds of revenue streams to determine what they can contribute. Then the state comes forward and says the difference between the total cost to educate all children and the local contribution is what the state is going to contribute, and it's called Chapter 70 funds. That's how it's termed, and you'll see that in the presentation. From the comprehensive funding for all kids who live in Chelsea is deducted the cost of students who are going to charter schools, who've elected vocational schools, and other students who are school choice. The remaining number is what is dedicated to Chelsea Public Schools, and because the state wants to ensure that we actually spend the dollars, not just budget the dollars, they establish a minimum figure of a required net school spending that we have to hit that number of actual spending, or else there are repercussions in future years in terms of our spending. What this looks like in action is if you anticipate that this circle is all of the costs for children who live in Chelsea. The share that is covered by the state is represented by this greenish bluish section. It's the largest section of our budget. The local share then is what is in white. From this is taken the charter tuition. So this wedge is effectively taken out of the pie of educational funding. Then within the local share, there's a required amount that the state has allocated in order to hit the net school spending figure. But then the city of Chelsea, in addition, offers of its own volition funding for items that are not eligible under net school spending. This could be the yellow buses, which we are not required to offer transportation, but we do, our crossing guards, other kinds of community things. And then the city of Chelsea provides the schools with a voluntary contribution that they add on top of all of these monies to support education of our students. In addition to these various general fund or Chapter 70 funding, we add grants, which we actively pursue each year, and we add revolving funds, which are revenue funds that the largest of which is our lunch fund, where we do get reimbursement from the federal government for the meals that we give out to our students for free. Looking specifically at the year that we're currently in, which is fiscal 2021, what you can see here is the relative share of these different funding sources. Chapter 70 in red, the city in green. What's unique this year, and it's the pandemic year, is the share of grant funding has increased from last year about 8.5% this time to 12.5% of the total budget. So there are resources that are coming in from grant funding. How do we allocate the funds, or how have we allocated it in fiscal 2021? The largest share of our monies go to our personnel. This is a people-heavy business educating students. So between the salaries and the health insurance, it's the largest category of spending. But we're also spending on special ed tuition, transportation, facilities, etc. Graphically, you can see the same information here, where the labor and insurance, the health insurance combined is about 73% of the budget for this year. And you can see the other subcategories of spending, of which special education, transportation, facilities are the largest. I have a caveat here, which is that this is the budget plan. This is a year where we're having different spending patterns, so we were actually able to invest a higher share in information technology in terms of one-time spending this year. Moving toward enrollment, where have we been and where are we going? This graphic shows the enrollment that Chelsea has had over almost 2 decades now, with the sharp uptick in enrollment between 2011 and 2013. You can see at the far right the pandemic, the 2020 enrollment figure. This is from October 1st, where we have a downturn. This is not unusual. This is happening across the country with school districts where particularly pre-K and kindergarten enrollments are down, but other age brackets are also down as well. It is a one-year, hopefully, trend. Putting the data together over the last 5 or 6 years, what does that lead us to contemplate for our enrollment for 2022? This is an important figure not only for revenues, because our revenues are based on per pupil, but also in terms of our allocation of space among the classrooms. So for fiscal 22, we're projecting 6,130 students in district and an additional 158 students who will be out of district. That's actually very similar to our projection for the year that we're in, but was not realized due to the pandemic. Couple highlights for folks. We're actually experiencing an increase in high school enrollment this year beyond last year, partially due to school closures in the region and also due to the Chelsea Opportunity Academy, which is doing a great job of keeping our kids in school. The under-enrollment in kindergarten and pre-K, I mentioned, is consistent with national trends, but we have had declines in kindergarten even pre-pandemic, which is a trend to watch. We've had declines at the elementary level since about 2010. We do have a very large cohort of students, a grade band of students that are currently in 7th grade that are moving on to 8th grade, and each year we have to account for that large number of students coming forward. Turning to our revenue picture for 2022, what do we expect to have available, hopefully, and how then we'll move into how we're going to deploy it. So the projected general funds that we're expecting, this is based on the governor's budget proposal, which was published at the end of January. What you can see here is the total amount of monies that are available to all Chelsea students, where the top row is the state's Chapter 70 funding. You can see a substantial increase there, approximately a 10% increase. And the city's obligation, the city's share that the state is mandating, is actually going down by $890,000, which is a welcome trend for the city, which is experiencing revenue challenges, lodging revenues, et cetera. So the city will be able to recoup those dollars for other purposes. From these numbers, we deduct our charter school. We have some charter school revenue. You can see that the charter school revenue is going up. This was one of the components of the school, the new SOA funds, Student Opportunity Act funds. But at the same time, the charter school tuition is also going up almost by the same amount. So at the bottom, you can see the overall trend change for Chelsea Public Schools. To these figures, we add the city's contribution. We are currently not anticipating that the city will increase its contribution beyond what they're giving us in the current year. So the not eligible and the city above the minimum and indirect cost recovery is the amount of grant monies that we capture. I should point out that the column heading should say fiscal 2021 on the left and 2022 in the middle. I'll fix that on the line on the website. In addition, we're expecting a substantial grant funding as part of the pandemic response they're calling it ESSER 2. These are one-time monies to be used by September 30, 2023. So this is just over 2 years worth of funding. It's a limited duration funding source. And it's dedicated to particular purposes to help schools safely reopen. Items such as social emotional supports, parent and student engagement, and importantly, how to address learning loss among students with a focus on acceleration and not remediation. So how do we identify where our students may have missed due to the pandemic, and how do we help accelerate to move them forward to stay on grade? The application for this funds is not open as yet. So when we talk in this budget later, these are just concepts that we're working on, proposals that we're working on, and everything we propose under the ESSER 2 does have to be approved by Department of Education. The good news here is they are currently have us allocated for $9.225 million across the 2-year period. I'll turn it back over to the superintendent.
So as we look into delving into our budget for fiscal year 2020, the theme is again, reopen, restore, rebuild. We're excited that we get to restore. We've waited a whole year for this, and we start to rebuild, and just real excited about what is before us. So our budget priorities for fiscal year 2020 are to strengthen and expand for equity, special education, ELL supports, curriculum development and support, social emotional supports, and family and community engagement. And then we're going to restore and add general education positions. We're going to accelerate literacy in math. We know that our students, when they come back, there's going to be loss of learning. And so we've invested heavily in the early literacy, because we know that if we can close those gaps early, then students will be successful down the road. So we're gonna really hit early literacy, and I do believe that the strategy that we have it will be very effective. We're also looking to reduce teacher to student ratio. So in Chelsea, we are limited by space in our buildings. However, we can reduce the teacher to student ratio in a single classroom, and that's what we're looking to do. We're going to continue to expand the Caminos program. We want to continue to expand Chelsea Opportunity Academy, look for a home for Chelsea Opportunity Academy, strengthen district operations, focus on teacher retention and recruitment and retention, and hiring diverse staff. And so this is our proposed budget plan for fiscal year 22, and I am going to turn it over to Monica.
So, as I say every year in this time, the first thing we always do is look at the cost to continue the operation that we're doing today. Every year, what we are doing today costs more in the future year. So this graphic sort of shows you some of those items of continued expenditure. The first is in terms of staffing. Our staff do have steps so that they are eligible for based on their tenure. And some of our agreements we have entered into agreement with some of the units for their cost of living increases. That total is about $1.1 million. The next line, which is usually a pretty substantial cost driver, is our health insurance and our retirement costs. I'm happy to say that the forecast in terms of health insurance from the city manager's office is a 0% increase in health insurance costs. So that is not going to be an added cost for fiscal 22, except as we add people, of course. In terms of special education tuition, this current year, the school committee authorized a prepayment of $1 million, which is helping us with our special ed tuition budget this year. We anticipate that we will be able to do a similar action this year going into next year, so that the increase in special ed tuition, which sometimes can be 5% or higher, we're only planning for a 2% increase in tuition. Transportation, a modest increase in transportation costs, largely anticipating that we'll have increased cleaning costs for the vehicles as we move back into transportation. In addition, the last line are positions that, as was mentioned before by the superintendent, which were moved on to CARES Act funding, our nurses, our social workers, some of our parent liaisons. We're now moving them back onto the base general fund budget, so that's about $1.9 million. Now moving into the fun part of the presentation, school by school, looking at the proposal for the budget. So key initiatives at our Early Learning Center for fiscal 22, student and family support, accelerated learning, science and technology. At the Early Learning Center from our general fund, and these are positions that will be permanent in the sense that they're coming from a funding source that is a stable general fund. One coach for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and an additional parent liaison for the Early Learning Center, where we currently have one. We're proposing to add another one for a total of 2 to be able to provide that direct contact with our families. From the grant funding, ESER 2, there's a new table at the bottom here. These are the limited duration positions that are supposed to be targeted toward closing gaps. An education team leader, which will work with the families who have students on IEPs, a reading specialist, a social worker, and we're proposing to continue 4 of the one-year positions we created this year to become extended. So what we had to do because of the changes in the classroom sizes and structures under remote learning is we did have to add personnel, limited duration. By putting them onto the new grant, this creates some stability at the schools even as they're still coming off of the pandemic. Moving to our Berkowitz Elementary School, key initiatives: student and family support, English language learners, special education, accelerated reading. From the general fund, an ELL teacher to work with our English language learners. We're proposing to increase what's currently a half-time position working with families on IEPs, increase it from a half to a full-time position, and increase what is now a half-time parent liaison to a full-time parent liaison. And for those of our parents who may remember, we previously had 1 liaison for 4 elementary schools. This year we have 2 for two elementary schools each, and with this budget we're proposing 1 per elementary school. From the ESER 2 grant, a reading specialist, and 2 paraprofessionals for the first grade classrooms. These are our general ed classrooms. Currently we have paraprofessionals that are split, so each para has 2 classrooms. With this, we will be able to have 1 dedicated paraprofessional for each of the first grade general ed classrooms to provide that support to some of our first graders may not have been in a classroom because their kindergarten year was spent working remotely. At the Hooks Elementary School, same goals that we have, adding an English language learner teacher, the same 2 positions going from half-time to full-time. Then on the grant, again, a reading specialist, the paraprofessionals for first grade, and in addition, 2 more paraprofessionals, which the Hooks has had this year due to their class structure under remote learning. For Kelly, same goals with the addition of our Caminos program. So for the Kelly Elementary, we're proposing 1 ELL teacher. We're proposing a new position of a Caminos coach, which is a teacher position with a stipend for coaching, who will not only support all of the Caminos classrooms at the Kelly, but will also work with the Early Learning Center and with the Brown Middle School in terms of continuity within the Caminos educational program. And again, increasing the half-time positions to full-time. From the grant, we're proposing a reading specialist, 2 paraprofessionals for the first grade, and continuing 1 teacher position that was added this year on a limited duration. From our Sokolowski Elementary School, the same goals. It doesn't have a Caminos program, I should take that out. Adding 1 special education teacher because the Sokolowski added an ELL teacher this year. The increase in the half-time positions and the librarian for the entire complex sits within the Sokolowski school budget. It has been a part-time position that we've really struggled to fill. We're proposing to increase it to a full-time, back to a full-time position for the first time in a number of years, so we'll have a librarian present in the library there. From grant funding, a reading specialist, and 2 paraprofessionals for the first grade. Now moving up into our middle schools, our Brown Middle School. Key initiatives: student and family support, English language learning, special education, Caminos expansion there, and really acceleration at our middle schools to really support our middle school learning. For the Brown, because they absorbed the 7th grade Caminos students this current year, those students will be moving up into the 8th grade, so they'll have a 7th grade and an 8th grade band of students in the Caminos program. We're adding 4 teachers, proposing to add 4 teachers that will work with those students in the specialty areas of English language, ELA, Spanish, history, math, and science. So they have a full cohort of teachers to work with the Camino students. We're proposing to increase the coach, the ELL coach that's there from a 0.33 to a half-time position to give more time to them, and a building substitute for when we have teacher absences. From the ESSER grant, a school counselor, formerly called guidance counselors, but a school counselor added, and then shared history coach and a shared science coach among the 3 middle schools to provide those content teachers with additional coaching support for our middle school students, and to continue 3 positions that were conceived of as 1-year positions for stability, and those are 3 paraprofessionals. At the Clark Ave Middle School, the same set of goals, including middle school acceleration. For Clark Ave, we're proposing 1 ELL teacher, 1 special education teacher, a student support specialist, which is a new position to work with students who might be struggling with absences, who might have a difficulty remaining in the classroom, to help those students really fully engage in learning. There is 1 at the Brown currently budgeted, which is why you didn't see that on the Brown slide. At the Clark Ave, we're proposing to increase the ELL coach to a full-time position so that we have 1 person at the Clark building and 1 person at the Williams building, at a building substitute. From the grant, school counselor, the shared coaches position, and a social worker position to increase what's currently 1.5 social workers to a full 2 social workers at Clark Ave Middle School. In addition to continue 2 paraprofessionals that are currently there on limited duration. At the Wright Academy, same goals. Here we have a slightly different class configuration as requested by the position configuration as requested by the principal. A coach for special education inclusion to help our students who may be in sub-separate part of the day also be included in classes. A literacy coach to help focus on science, technology, math, and humanities. A student support specialist, increasing the coach for ELL, and a building substitute. From the grant funding, a school counselor, the shared coach positions for history and science, and the social worker increasing from 1.0 to 1.5. At Chelsea High School, key initiatives, student and family support, English language learning, special education, and general ed access and education. Here we're proposing from the general fund 2.5 positions for our ELA program inside the bridge. So these are our Spanish language programs, 2.5 positions to address 1 which is currently shared with COA. We're proposing a coach for special ed inclusion to help the teachers who have special ed students fully engage them in the classroom. A half teacher for special ed to make a half position full. 3 classroom teachers of biology, health, and math, and a parent liaison that will increase the total number of liaisons from 1 to 2 at the high school. From the grant, a social worker specifically working with our English language learning students at the high school, and 2 positions that were intended to be 1-year positions. We're going to continue them. That's a math position and a science position, resulting in ability to work with those classes, have more teachers for those classes. Chelsea Opportunity Academy, key initiatives are science, accelerating general ed, identifying space, and enrollment increases. So for Chelsea Opportunity Academy, 1 teacher for science, technology, engineering, and math, a data analyst, which is a position that will assist with administratively, but also to be able to do some deep dives into data about the students, what's working, what's not working in terms of their forward progress, and they're going to combine 2 half-time positions into a whole. From the grant, we are proposing to fund the lease costs for a new site. We do believe it is related to pandemic in that it will allow us increased social distancing at the high school if we're able to utilize those classes. recapturing all of the students, keeping them in the school, we think is very eligible for the Easter 2, and we would need staffing for a new space when we identify it. In our special education district-wide extended learning and health, student support, interpretation, extended learning. Here we're proposing a full-time board-certified behavioral analyst who can work with our special needs students to help with behavioral supports, 2 speech language pathologists, and an additional extended learning site coordinator who will work with after-school programming, before-school programming to help really give that focused attention to extend the school day for a lot of our students. From the grant, we're proposing an assistant director of special ed, 3 additional speech language pathologists for a total of 5, 8 interpreters and translators for IEPs. We've heard from our community the desire for interpretation, and we have learned that a lot of our parent liaisons have been having to interpret for IEP meetings. By having a focused team to be able to do that work, we believe that offers up time for our parent liaisons to do that really important work of working with families directly. 5 nurse positions to help us return from the pandemic, and 2 nurses aides, both of which will be limited duration. Other district-wide positions, creative new ideas that have come up from our discussions, twilight school stipends. This is something that the superintendent had been working on last year, the idea to offer later in the evening classes for our students, perhaps who are working during the day but still want to keep moving forward with their degree, an orchestra program, and importantly, and it's been woven through everything we've been doing this year, is equity and inclusion, and continuing to broaden those efforts around all of our schools and all of our grade bands. Looking at this from the numbers perspective, this table shows us where we are reducing, adding positions, and if we're moving for grants. As I said last night with a small crew, I don't know that Chelsea's ever had that reduction row empty for a number of years. So we are not in a position where we're proposing to reduce any of the existing positions. And we are proposing to add a large number of positions on our general fund, which again is the funding that will be continuing. When we put this together with the grant monies, the 2-year grant monies, we're really looking at a substantial increase in staffing at the elementary, middle, high school, and district-wide positions. The district-wide positions are noted at the bottom there: special ed, parent liaisons, nurses, interpreters, and assistant director of special ed. In summary, following on the superintendent's comments of all the budget priority areas, we do feel that this proposal has hit all of the key areas that we outlined for the school committee and the community, and we look forward to answering any questions that you all may have. Thank you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Ms. Limboy, thank you so much for your presentation and for working so hard on putting this together. Dr. Abeda, before opening it up, is there anything else you would want to add before?
At this time, I just want to say I am thrilled at the community participation. Again, I'm so thankful for the teachers that came in the evenings and provided input. I hope that they see that. I hope that that they see that we really did listen. And I'm just excited about this budget. We have waited a whole year for Student Opportunity Act, and you know, we were so excited last year, and then the crisis came, and to be able to finally do this again is huge for us, and we're just extremely excited. And I just want to thank the cabinet team for the thoughtfulness that we have put into the budget as far as aggregating the data and synthesizing it. And then it's a quick turnaround from the community conversations to present this budget today, and also thank you, Monica, for putting it together feverishly over the last couple of days as we were getting input and we're adjusting each time. So I just want to publicly thank Monica for her hard work, especially during budget season and during this crisis. It's her and her team were amazing. And I just want to give a real thank you to Ms. Lamboy tonight.
Don't mind.
So we
Monica, you can see there's a lot of emojis with lots of enthusiastic hands.
So, can I say something special about Monica? And I want to say this publicly. When we were in the middle of the crisis, and all of our essential workers were in, and it was it was probably, I think, May, and I was here and I was looking for Monica, and I was like, wonder where she is. She was down at the cafeteria making food and sandwiches and just helping distribute out because we were short on staff during the height of the pandemic. And that's what we have in our operational staff as a leader. So she leads by example, and she also does the numbers. And I'm just fortunate to have Monica on our side with us.
And it was tuna fish sandwiches, and I really don't like tuna fish. So,
so
extra kudos for that.
Yeah, extra kudos. But anyways, what we can do is we have a couple of community members that have written letters. I know we have another, Mr. Ludquis is on, and he would like to make a comment. So perhaps we should read the letters and let Cole share, and then we can answer questions after that. So, Mr. Ludquis, would you like to share your comments?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Abeta. Thank you very much, committee members. Bravo, Monica. That's exceptional work, and it must be incredibly hard. So, from all of us, thank you very much. I just wanted to take this opportunity to touch base on the concept of an orchestra program here at Chelsea Public Schools. Really here to advocate for the future of our performing artists, not just at Chelsea High, where I teach. I'm the Cantari director there at Chelsea High, but also for all of our young artists, really district-wide. And I don't know if any of you remember our district concerts. I do. It's been a while since we've had an opportunity to have one, but I think one of my favorites performances every year was to see our little tiny first and second graders sawing away on their violins to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, or what song that our string specialists had prepared for them. The great part about a program like that is it grows and it matures and it graduates and it moves on, and those first classes of those students are currently freshmen and sophomores at Chelsea High. The thing that we'd like to see here in the future is a bit of a fulfillment to those students and to their future compatriots, to the creation of an orchestra program here at CPS. If you look around us, you can find a number of similar programs. For example, at Everett and at Somerville, several of my colleagues, good friends of mine, work in the Somerville Orchestra program, and they work hand in hand with Longy, with El Sistema, and creating truly unique experiences for their students. I think there's no reason we can't bring said experiences to our population, to our students here at Chelsea Public Schools. So I just wanted to take this opportunity not only to get some information firsthand, but to speak on that program and maybe a future home for another ensemble here at Chelsea Public Schools.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You did see we did add an FTE, and we want to continue. We want to support the vision and build.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Welcome, and thank you. We miss seeing you. we miss hearing the kids.
We're very excited. We've just begun recording our graduation selection, and just begun recording our selections for our spring concert. So keep an eye peeled for that. I'll make sure to share maybe a sneak peek in the near future for you.
That's great.
Thank you.
And Veronica, I think we have a few that emailed comments.
Yep, I have one statement that I can read now. So I have a statement from Claudia Lowry. She is an EL history teacher at Chelsea High School. Good evening to the Chelsea School Committee. My name is Claudia Lowry, and I am one of the ELL history teachers in the Bridge Academy at Chelsea High School. First, I would like to comment on the overall budget process. I participated in the budget workshop last year and again this year with Central Office leadership, and I look forward to the community meeting on March 11th. I am grateful for the opportunity to hear from my colleagues and community, and to be heard in turn. I am also excited that one of the district's top priorities is to reduce class sizes. Though a concrete number has not been proposed, I would like to again voice my support for class sizes differentiated by type of course, which currently does not exist in CPS. I would especially advocate for a smaller cap on classes in the Bridge Academy, all proficiency levels, and across the district in foundational classes. Currently, the cap for classes at the high school is 30, though E1 foundational classes in the Bridge Academy regularly exceeds this amount to the point that in recent years, teachers outside of the Bridge Academy have been asked to teach Bridge Academy courses, or teachers in the Bridge Academy have sacrificed their preparation period to take on additional section. I will note that this year's E1 classes are smaller as a result of the former presidents limiting the entry of immigrants across the southern border. But this is an anomaly and should be considered in this year's budgeting. Additionally, lower student participation in this year's access testing will also result in fewer Ls exiting ELL status across the district. Other teachers in the Bridge Academy are co-teachers in the SEI setting, and increased need for co-teaching will result in a cascading staffing effect when also considering next year's new arrivals. While the issues of oversized classes are not exclusive to the Bridge Academy and remain an issue across Chelsea High and the district, it is especially challenging to meet the academic, linguistic, and socio-emotional needs of our newest arrivals in such large classes. Specifically, I want to highlight that many of our students present with limited or interrupted schooling, but this is not the case for all. As we do not have specific SLIFE program or SLIFE strand for these students, an area of future discussion, I hope. ELL teachers, particularly at the foundational E1 level, can at times feel like they are teaching two totally different classes within which there is still a wide spectrum of students. This description does not take into consideration our students who are dually identified as having special needs. Regardless of prior education history, all of our students deserve to progress as quickly as their English proficiency as they are able. And this is impossible to facilitate while in classes of 25, 30, or more students. As the school committee considers this request, I would like to point to other districts that differentiate class cap sizes. In Waltham, ESL and SCI classes are capped at 15 students. In Boston, schools designated as level 3 in the state accountability system have a class cap of 26 across the board, but have further caps for ELD courses, 20 students without a paraprofessional, 25 with a paraprofessional. Watertown caps ELL courses at 20 and foundational courses at 15 students. For any smaller cap to be implemented, we require more Bridge Academy educators across multiple subject areas. Thank you for your consideration.
Great. If we go back to the CHS slide, we did add ELL teachers to Bridge because we knew that was a concern. I believe it was 3.0 FTE, if I recall.
2.5.
We can reassess once the kids start coming in and the students start coming in. We can definitely reassess. So questions from school committee?
Mr. Jimenez had his hand up, and then Ms. Santiago will follow.
All right. Hi, everyone. Sorry. Hope he is good. He just stood up on me during the first comment, so it's been a great 5 minutes over here. So what I had is more of a comment than a question. First thing I want to do is just thank Dr. Abeda and Monica for the great work that you've been doing for this budget. Right, seeing no reductions is amazing. So I just want to make sure that my next comments are not going to they're not taking away from the great work that you're doing, because it has nothing to do with your work. It has to do with the people who make decisions in the State House, right, who have decided not to fund us to the level that we should get funding. So there's two things in particular that I want people to know about and really help us advocate, right? Make sure that it is not just the school committee advocating for this, but really people in the community as well. The first part is the enrollments being down, right? Monica mentioned, right, that this is hopefully a 1-year blip and that those students will come back. However, next year's budget is based on the numbers for this year. And so if we get all those kids back, we would then be doing next year's work with the number of students that were calculated this year. So I think we really need the state legislature to make sure that they count the number of students that are going to be in the classrooms. Now that is kind of very challenging, right? So what I believe should happen is we should use last year's numbers, right, which are higher than the ones that we have right now, so that way our budget isn't impacted because some parents chose to stay away, and not enroll their kids for kindergarten or pre-K because of the pandemic, right? Second is the SOA money, right? It's really great that we're getting year 1 of the SOA this year, but that money really should have come last year, and we should be getting year 2 this year, right? So we should be getting 2 years of funding, right? Unfortunately, our legislators chose not to fund our schools and last year because they didn't want to raise taxes on the wealthiest folks. So while the kids in the wealthy communities have plenty of resources to go around, our kids are the ones who are continuing to bear the burden of this pandemic. So we really, really need them to do better than what they are choosing to do right now. So I just would encourage all of you to call your legislators. I know especially Senator DiDomenico is on top of this. He does want to make sure that we are doing the best that we can to give our students as much of this SOA money as we can as soon as possible. But we need to make sure that we're calling every legislator, right? If you know people who are outside of Chelsea, have them call their legislators too. It is really, really important that we get this money so that we can continue funding, not just what we're saying that we're going to fund now, but everything else that we want to make sure that we're funding that we just don't have the resources for right now. Our kids need this money. And so just want to make sure if you want to learn more about this, feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk about this. If there's anything that you want to discuss, please reach out to us. It is part of what we really need to be doing as leaders in this district. So thank you all again so much for all the work that you're doing and for all the work that you do for our kids. And I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you on getting everything that we can out of the money that we are given. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jimenez. Ms. Santiago?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Garcia. Dr. Albeda and team, thank you again for a school committee member like myself that's been on here less time than others. I definitely can appreciate that there has been no reductions, that we haven't made cuts in a year like this, and that through your leadership, we've been able to do the best we can with what we have. And echoing Mr. Jimenez, that the arrival of this SOA funding has been something that we've been waiting far too long for, but definitely appreciative that it is now here, and that we can implement some of these proposed, looking at the proposed budget and seeing in ways that we can spend it and how we should be spending it, given the priorities before us. Two things jumped out at me. One is the high school. So in our previous budget conversations, it sounded like, given the student population that we have, the total amount of students in the high school, and different needs that have presented themselves over the years, right off the bat, I want to say thank you. It's noted there that there was a lot of thought and a lot of listening that did occur, and some feedback there from the community that was implemented. And I also just feel that one thing that really struck me as an opportunity, I think that we should continue to look at, is the amount of special education students that we have here in our district. And I think it's something that we're seeing not just in Chelsea, but in other areas across the country. The increase with children that have all different kinds of learning needs, that ultimately when they get to high school, the amount of support and programming is less. And so when I see that in this proposed budget, we have right off the bat, I see that the district is adding new positions to help the district as a whole. That is like a big plus, right? So there's like support, there's coaching, and there's direction, there's guidance, and there's just like a real clear intent to make our programming stronger all across the board. And I think that's brilliant. And so I just want to really commend you guys for doing that. And also just having witnessed the process that we've had before in which you're implementing a lot of the things that we said we could try to do under SLA. But again, let's keep looking at the needs of the high school students, because we did add a substantial amount of positions in the middle school and elementary schools. And while there's more students as a whole there's still a lot of need in the high school that, we always got to keep revisiting and making sure that we're doing the best that we can. And especially when it comes to, again, to special education students, and sharing a little bit of Claudia's point there, that when you have multiple needs, not just, if you're an ELL student, and then also if you have any type of an IEP, and as you get older, that those supports decrease, not just in the school, but also in large parts of our communities. I think it's just something that we should continue to watch and do the best we can there and keep those things in mind. Lastly, as a mom of an amazing artist son who attended Chelsea High School, I'm just so pleased. And Almi, thank you for your leadership around the orchestra and thinking about ways that we continue to lift arts, music, and programming in our schools. That's not just conducive to a better learning experience for students, but also from a socio-emotional perspective, especially in these times. And as I shared before, as an adult, it's something that I'm leaning into more. So I just really appreciate Mr. Lundquist being here today, and thank you for sharing, and for all the teachers out there that are supporting our kids with this kind of programming as well. So, and that's all I have to say. Thank you so much for a great presentation and your work.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments from the school committee? All right, team, I don't think so. Dr. Abeda, I'll turn it over to you. If there are any closing comments from central office.
Sure. We would like to just invite everyone to our next meeting, which will be the public hearing. And if I am correct, that is on March 11th at 6:30, and it will be virtual as well. So we hope that people can come to that, and that will be, again, March 11th at 6:30. Again, thank you to everyone who has participated in this process. And we're just so thankful for everyone taking the time and really making this a budget that represents our community. And we're real excited about it. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, team, and be safe. And I'll see you on March 11th. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.